Yu Yang saw a person flying in the sky, stretched his neck upwards and shouted, "Dear, come out quickly and see God." The shadow carried a sword and tumbled as he flew, looking like he was going to fall. Yu Yang shouted again, "Bro, don't fly too fast, your pants are dropping off." The person flying in the sky fell on the ground head first. Yu Yang, a normal high school student, didn't even bother to ask if the person who fell down was okay, but instead picked up the sword that shone with a golden light. He yelled, "Master, this flying sword is a treasure, you'll break it if you fling it randomly like that. What will happen if it accidentally hits small kids? Even if it didn't, it's also not good if it hit the nearby flowers and grasses. How about letting your disciple take care of this sword? And the universal pouch? Such a powerful and intelligent immortal like Master shouldn't be carrying an old pouch like this on your waist. This disciple will help you to safeguard them." The old Taoist priest that fell to the ground almost coughed blood. Having lived for thousands of years, it was the first time he met such a shameless person who had randomly acknowledged him as his master. "Master, your disciple has reached a marriageable age, but still had no match yet. Do you have a granddaughter by any chance?" "I won't care much about her looks or age, I'm not a picky person," Yu Yang chuckled lewdly. Finally, the enraged priest couldn't take it anymore and kicked him on the butt, shouting, "Get lost! Get lost, you brat!" Just like that, Yu Yang was kicked into another dimension. Ah! His eyes moved, he's awake! Xiao Sangij is finally awake. Yu Yang's eyes had not fully opened when he heard a voice as clear as bells ringing at his ears. "Shuang heir, don't be rude towards your brother." Then, he heard a warm and gentle, motherly voice that carried an air of motherly love with them. Yu Yang opened his eyes. The old Taoist priest had gone away. Instead, an adorable and lively girl sprang into his view. She was a small girl wearing a bluish-green Chinese gown, her pale white arms stuck out of the sleeves. Her hair was braided with red ribbons on two sides and flowed down to her waist. Her pearl-white wrist was adorned with a silver bracelet that had a small bell. The small girl mischievously reached out her hands to pinch Yu Yang's nose. As her soft, supple arms moved, the bells on her bracelet jingled, sounding much like her crisp and clear giggles. Eh? Yu Yang felt strange. Is this girl that old Taoist priest granddaughter? Such a high-quality Lolita. As he was preparing to make a move on the girl, suddenly a pair of arms reached out from behind and held onto the mischievous girl, swatting her small hands lightly. Thinking that punishment for being mischievous was enough, the girl was then drowned in the arm's embrace. The small girl was not even afraid and thought that it was fun, giggling away in her mother's embrace. Grimacing at the cute scene in front of him, Yu Yang thought about the strangeness of it all. His gaze swept across the room and fixed upon the woman behind the small girl, and his heart unconsciously let out a small sigh. Oh my, what a beautiful wife! A 30-year-old young woman was sitting in front of Yu Yang. She had delicate features, her complexion white as the moon and her eyes clear as spring. Her small mouth bloomed into a smile that was as gentle and refined as flowing water. Her lustrous black hair was pulled up high into a bun, barely decorated with a single purple phoenix hairpin, simple and elegant but yet still stylish. Looking at her as a whole, her expression seemed to appear even more beautiful and full of wisdom. Adorned in a sky-blue gown and a jade bracelet on her wrist that was hugging the small girl, she was a sight for Yu Yang to see. If I could marry such a woman, I wouldn't want anything else. The beautiful woman saw that Yu Yang was awake and her smile disappeared. Her jade-white complexion was filled with a grieved and guilty expression. "Senor, don't be so rash again next time. Who gives you the notion to drown yourself in the river when things get hard? Luckily we managed to save you in time, otherwise, how would I, how would I face my older sister? When Big Sis entrusted you to me, Sin Young, I had already thought of you as my own child. Sanner, so many years passed, I could never have the heart to punish you. This time you made a big mistake, and if I don't make you remember the lesson today, I would be letting my big sister down. Next month, wait until your fourth uncle comes back, ask him for a beating as your punishment. The small girl twitched her little nose and followed along, ask him for a beating, pa, let him beat you until your butt is swollen. Ah. Yu Young was bewildered. When did he ever try to drown himself? Where is this? Where did the old Taoist priest kicked him to? Is she mistaking him as someone else? A strange thought flew past his mind. Could it be that someone that looked like me and I had drowned in the river together, and this beautiful woman saved me instead of the other guy, letting that unlucky chap drown and became fish food? His forehead dripped with sweat thinking of that. This misunderstanding is too big. The guy who was transported to another dimension was scared that he would say the wrong thing if he opened his mouth. He did not dare to explain the misunderstanding, let alone ask where that place was. If the other party realized that he was not her precious Sanner, she could throw him back into the river. That's not good. The beautiful woman looked at the nervous Yu Yang, whose forehead was filled with beads of sweat and face pale as sheets. She thought that he was feeling guilty and looked very cute, so her voice became much gentler. Sanner, it's okay if you understand your mistakes. Young people shouldn't be afraid making mistakes, but it's a problem if they don't learn from their mistakes. Sin Young has watched you grow up and knows that you know what's good and bad for you. It's just that the matter of the daughter of the Shui family rejecting your engagement had hit you too hard and made you do something rash. Sanner, even though Shui family's daughter is good, if her heart is not set on you, let the engagement go. If you can't share your troubles and happiness with your wife and support each other in troubled times, then you shouldn't even get married. Look at our Yu family, we are one of the big 4 families. There are so many girls in this world, did you think you won't be able to find one? Yes, Yu Yang decided to feign himself as the fool who drowned himself on the river. After the crisis was over, he would wait for an opportunity to explain. Sanner, it's good if you understand. Sin Young is relieved now. The beautiful woman had been prepared to persuade him for a long time, but the boy had unexpectedly came around after jumping once into the river. She thought that miracles did exist. The beautiful woman then told Yu Yang to rest well. She released the small girl and stood up, preparing to leave the room. Yu Yang heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. Luckily he had managed to hide the truth. But now he had to find a way to slip away, just in case that chap who drowned himself didn't die and came back. Everything would then be exposed. The beautiful woman held the small girl's hands and walked towards the door, then suddenly turned back and asked, Sanner, will you promise me that you wouldn't try anything rash? You may look weak, but you have a strong mind inside. Even though you might look agreeable on the outside, you have a stubborn heart, that I know. Please don't wait until I'm gone and do foolish things behind my back again. You really won't do anything rash again, right? No, I won't. Yu Yang shook his head like a rattle drum. Why would he kill himself? He still need to find that old Taoist priest to seek revenge. The beautiful woman looked at Yu Yang's face that was full of sincerity and her heart felt much better. Sin Young trusts you, Sanner. Don't ever try to kill yourself again. Your parents are not here anymore. Your fourth uncle had no sons and I'm infertile, Binger is a girl and Schwanger is still so young. Your father and fourth uncle didn't have anyone else to continue our family's line, so it's all up to you now. Remember this, okay? Yu Yang sweated profusely, thinking, no, you can't leave it up to me, I'm not your Sanner. Your Sanner had already become fish food. I'm afraid that this matter of continuing bloodline won't ever be fulfilled. But of course, he couldn't say it out loud. He simply nodded and muttered a small yes. The small girl was getting bored, so she let go of the woman's hands and jumped out of the door, scampering away in an instant. The beautiful woman called out at the small girl, but she didn't listen, so she had to chase after the small girl. Even as she walked out the door, she turned back again and said worriedly, "Sanner, don't be too depressed. Even your stupid uncle only managed to fulfill his first contract 1 month before his 20th birthday. Don't you still have 3 months left? You had worked hard for so many years. It's still not the end yet. Do you want to give up now?" Nobody from our family had ever failed to make a contract with a summoning grimoire. Trust me, you won't be an exception. I think maybe it was because your parents sealed your grimoire when you were young. They didn't want you to successfully make a grimoire contract at such a young age and then become arrogant. Continue to train hard, okay? Otherwise, with the talent you displayed since you were young, how could you not make a contract? Believe in me, you have your parents' blood flowing through your veins. You'll definitely be a talented and outstanding person in the future. You will be successful, so you must not be discouraged and try even harder. Grimoire contract? What the heck is a summoning grimoire? Maybe the bloodline of that drowning guy was good, but he was not him. He was just a normal guy. If he had any outstanding aspects, it could only be his good skills in playing games, especially the games from overseas. Yu Yang didn't know how to make a contract with any grimoire, but after listening to the beautiful woman, he could guess that the guy who looked like himself decided to commit suicide because he had given up all hope. That guy didn't have any parents and couldn't succeed in making a contract with whatever grimoire for so long, then her fiancé refused their engagement. He must have thought life was too hard to live on and drowned himself. The sadder thing was that although he tried to drown himself, the one who was saved was actually another person who looked like him. In the end, he himself was brought back here, and that pitiful 18-something guy had probably bought a free express ticket to the bottom of the ocean. The only thing that Yu Yang didn't understand was how could he himself be in the river? Is it because that old Taoist priest kicked me into the river? Why would he kick him into the river? Or did that old geezer wanted him to be reborn as this pitiful guy? Yu Yang thought until beads of sweat flowed down his forehead. This joke went too far. Sanner, you should rest first. These are my thoughts. Even if you can't make a contract with the grimoire, you are still my precious Sanner. I think of you as my own son, so even if we had to sell all of our wealth, we'll think of something for your future. Your fourth uncle may not say it out loud, but he also thought the same way. Sanner, just concentrate on recovering. Maybe tomorrow you could suddenly make a contract. Successfully. The beautiful woman then repeatedly asked him to rest before turning her body and walked out of the room. Yu Yang was moved by her words. Although her concern wasn't directed towards him, she was really kind towards that pitiful guy. He thought it was foolish of him to commit suicide. Such a good stepmother, how could you find another in the world? Instead of cherishing what he had, that pitiful boy drowned himself for his failed engagement. Serves him right. Yu Yang's heart was not thinking objectively anymore. He had wanted a person who loved him that much, but he couldn't even have one. He looked at the beautiful woman exiting the room and heaved a sigh of relief. If only he was that Sanner and had such a nice stepmother. Unfortunately, he wasn't that pitiful guy. Lying back in his bed, his gaze fell onto a huge book with a gold cover on the table. It looked a little bronze, its color faded and old. It was strangely thick, 2 or 3 times thicker than a normal book. The cover was even filled with strange, ancient characters. Yu Yang felt a strange attraction towards that book. There seemed to be an unknown being who slowly called him forth. That kind of feeling felt just like the anticipation of installing a game, waiting impatiently to scroll the mouse and clicking on the start button. Yu Yang subconsciously reached his hands out, wanting to touch that strange-looking golden book. Unbeknownst to him, the moment his fingers touched the book, that book suddenly shone with a golden light. The whole room was filled with a golden light. Under such a bright light, Yu Yang used his other hand and covered his eyes. He almost couldn't open his eyes due to the strong light. Suddenly, an endless flow of knowledge surged into his brain violently. Furthermore, it was so strong that it couldn't be stopped. Yu Yang didn't even have the time to react as his brain was stuffed with strange knowledge to the brim. On the other side, the book was still emitting a strong light, like there were still even more knowledge to be transmitted. His mind seemed to understood countless of things, but also not comprehending them. He couldn't grab the main knowledge and was unable to understand clearly the knowledge he had learned. Now, Yu Yang was in a situation where he seemed to understand, but not to understand, seemed clear but not too clear, such a confused state. Inside his body, there seemed to be a change. It seemed like something had awakened. It felt like a mysterious power that had slept inside him for all this while was awakened. The revelations seemed like heralds of angels singing at heaven's gate, causing Yu Yang to tremble all over. Although his ears couldn't hear it, his heart heard the voice very clearly. Indeed, a mysterious power was calling to himself from within his body. But he didn't understand what it meant and only heard the mysterious power call. It was such a unique experience, the voice sounding even more heavenly than an angel's song, immersing him deep within. That kind of beautiful voice can move a person's soul, like a mother's lullaby you heard when you were sick as a kid. Thousands of words would not be able to describe that feeling. At the same time, in the midst of his consciousness, Yu Yang saw a flying sword emitting a strange light. It was mysteriously spinning on its own. The strangeness of it all can't be described in words. The flying sword was then held in the hands of a fairy. It looked like she was singing and dancing gracefully, freely moving across the empty space. What the heck is all this? The golden light engulfing Yu Yang slowly disappeared, returning back into the book, barely shining in between of Yu Yang's fingers and the book itself. The silence returned as the mysterious call disappeared. That flying sword also started to disappear without trace. Yu Yang snapped back into reality and was surprised to find that his fingers were shining with light. Yu Yang froze and wriggled his fingers. The golden light slowly disappeared. However, that bronze-colored book that looked really heavy unexpectedly started to float in the air and stopped in front of him. The feeling it gave Yu Yang right now was not that of a heavy golden book, but something that was a part of him, like his own arm or legs. At the door, the beautiful woman stood awestruck, her face full of tears. She leaned on the sides of the door, using the door to support her trembling, emotional body. Then, her body seemed to lose strength as she fell onto the ground. She had watched everything, her face showing an extremely surprised but happy expression. Her tears flowed like a stream of water, dripping onto her clothes. Sanner, did you succeed in making a contract with a summoning grimoire? Is this real? Am I dreaming? Heavens above, this is all thanks to Big Sis' blessings. Big Sis, did you see that Sanner had succeeded in making a contract? I've said it before, Sanner is not a good-for-nothing, thank heavens that he's not. I thank you from the bottom of my heart on behalf of our Sanner. The beautiful woman kneeled on the ground, her emotions flowing uncontrolled. She kowtowed sincerely, thanking the heavens for their blessings. Her white forehead had become red due to her kowtows, and the floor wet with her tears. But the beautiful woman didn't mind the pain and continued to kowtow and give thanks. Yu Yang quickly came over and tried to help Xin Yang up. Although he was a fake, he was still moved by the beautiful woman. At the door, the small girl had returned too, her hands holding a big red pinwheel. She tilted her head and asked, "Mom, why are you crying on the floor?"